Let us commence by elucidating what exactly a Necron tomb world represents. This planet, as ordained 60 million years ago by the silent King Sarek, submerged into slumber alongside millions and occasionally even billions of Necrons. All of their tombs are nestled beneath the planet's surface because the Necrons anticipated everything, suspecting their rest might be disturbed. Currently, many tomb worlds host colonies and even vast hive worlds of the Imperium of Man. However, this hardly impedes the awakening of the ancient and enigmatic Necron race. Yet, most often, the Necrons constructed their tombs on the most desolate and uninhabited planets to deter any thoughts of colonization. Various Xenos and, of course, the Adeptus Mechanicus are constantly in search of Necron tomb worlds, dispatching specialized expeditions. But the majority simply do not return for evident reasons. All tomb worlds are categorized into three types. Crown worlds, which serve as the Necron's central hubs. Here lies the most formidable defense, which seldom needs activation because a Necron crown world is exceedingly difficult to detect. And of course, all Necrons of the crown worlds awaken from their great slumber almost without any casualties, and sometimes completely so. It is on these worlds that the seeds of dynasties are found, and all the paramount lords of this grand race reside. In the Necron Empire, there are also so-called core worlds, which are similarly crucial and form the nucleus of all dynasties. It is paramount to ensure that everything is in order on the core worlds, as they act as the driving force of the Necrontyr race. There also exist fringe worlds. These are planets the Necrons deem not as significant but nonetheless important. Such are the furthest and least developed colonies, but make no mistake. The Necrons will fiercely and rigorously defend the fringe worlds, as they are part of their dominions. In general, for the defense of their tomb worlds, the Necrons employ a multitude of varied devices, which are governed by the Tomb Worlds program. However, particularly interesting is the null field matrices, which was developed during the time of the War in Heaven. Such a matrix generates energy that disrupts a psyker's connection with the warp, preventing the use of psychic powers. The same plight befalls demons, who simply vanish upon entering this field, as they cannot linger long in the material world. Furthermore, null field matrices are highly effective against the Tyranids, disrupting their synaptic link and contact with the hive mind. The system is truly state-of-the-art, despite requiring enormous energy expenditures, which of course the Necrons can afford due to the Citan shards. And indeed, the Necrons possess numerous different fields and shields for the protection of tomb worlds, but now the focus is on the worlds themselves. Let us begin, perhaps, with the crown worlds of the central dynasties. First on our list is the Subakar dynasty, renowned for its tomb world known as the Hollow Sun. Understanding is essential that all Necron tomb worlds are unique. There are no two identical tomb worlds, each stands out in its own way. The Hollow Sun, for instance, is literally situated within the raging nuclear furnace of a star located in the Jericho Reach. When the mad Pharaoh Amontek, who by the way was famed to have the capacity to cleave planets asunder with his scythe, according to the tales of the Harlequins, commanded the construction of the crown world, he declared that the builders must achieve the impossible, and indeed they accomplished the impossible. They literally tamed the star at the very heart of the Slinar Drift, and since then have prevented the star from consuming the tomb of Subakar. It is, incidentally, quite convenient when your tomb world is literally at the heart of a star. Clearly, no unwanted guest will ever venture there. Who would even need to fly to a star? Besides, there exists no means to detect the presence of the Necrons inside a star, and who would even conceive hiding there? Only to a truly mad Pharaoh, who perfectly understood that the sleep lasts 60 million years and requires substantial preparation. Because almost everyone loathed Amontek, having slain so many of the Ancient One's minions, obliterating races entirely, he could well expect vengeance from one of them. Amontek feared the Eldar the most, who dreamt of finding his tomb world and exacting revenge for their kin. He desired to awaken and destroy all that would remain of the Eldar, assuming, of course, anything remained. In general, little was left of them, so they posed no significant threat to him. Of course, Amontek was no fool, and had prepared planets rich in resources throughout the region in advance, so that upon awakening, he could immediately acquire what he desired. Many of them, of course, were destroyed, but some remained and helped quickly restore the dynasty of Subakar. Overall, in the Slinar Drift, planets are rich in valuable minerals, so everything worked out. Amontek had planned to awaken peacefully and lead the Subakar dynasty. But the trouble was that even before his slumber, he disliked the Charnavok dynasty. It's normal for the Necrons to detest one another. When he fell asleep, the spark of hatred for the Charnavoks did not extinguish in his consciousness and gnawed at him for all those millions of years. The sense of grievance grew within him and eventually seized the consciousness of the sleeping Pharaon under the control of the Hollow Sun program, which decided to awaken him following a transmission received from the Charnavoks. As soon as he opened his eyes, hatred literally flooded Amontek's consciousness. He ceased to be himself. The only thing that remained in his mind was the purest essence of animosity towards his fraternal dynasty. Amontek awoke not in his right mind and sent a counter-signal for the destruction of the Crown World's control program, causing many Necrons to become mindless automatons. If it were not for the new regent Ahotek, who awoke in his tomb and realized the dynasty was in decline, I think Subakar would not exist today. Ahotek gathered the coherent Necrons and seized control of the tomb, which was on the brink of system failure. Now he is known as Pharaon of the Subakar dynasty, albeit lacking the command protocols still entrenched within the mind of Pharaon Amontek. The foremost objective of Ahotek is to extract these protocols and make Subakar a great dynasty once again. Particularly aiding him in this endeavor is the cryptech Ozkan the Codify, who has been engaged in the search for a method to extract the protocols from Pharaon's head for many years. By the way, Ozkan has his own plans. He is not especially fond of Ahotek and dreams of resurrecting Pharaon under the moniker of the Crimson Scythe, meaning Amontek, of course. And Pharaon Amontek is still alive and asleep, holding on to the protocols and no way to wake up. He now faces two possibilities: to die or to voluntarily surrender them, a choice Pharaons typically never make. In any case, the Hollow Sun is gradually coming to life. Local scarabs are repairing the stasis crypts, slowly restoring everything to order. Most importantly, there are genuinely many Necrons in the tomb, and they could cause a commotion in the Jericho Reap. In Amontek's head are hidden not only the command protocols, but also the secret of the Hollow Sun's creation and a plethora of other mysteries extending far beyond the Jericho Reap. Ozkan, the Codify, once had a vision in which he saw something truly immense and powerful, a weapon planet far larger than the Hollow Sun. Now it remains to be found. Nevertheless, the tomb world is still considered a true Necron artifact and a marvel of engineering. Rumors abound that the star itself was specifically created to house the tomb world, after which the Necrons simply drilled a hole through its raging ocean of fire and constructed their sanctuary there. It is also said that the necropolis could have been built elsewhere and then transported inside the star. None of those who built the Hollow Sun have awakened yet, so there's no one even to ask. At this point, the art of creating such tomb worlds is considered lost. The Subakar dynasty's necropolis itself is the size of a huge city, filled with myriad mysterious machines occupying much of its space. They are needed to protect the crown world from the star's energy. The old dusty halls of the tomb are covered with machine components capable of altering reality. Millions of Canoptek scarabs continuously patrol the crypts, tirelessly ensuring that there is not the slightest hint of malfunction in the system. The Hollow Sun has many notable locations. One of these is the pyramidal tomb of Pharaon Amontek, as well as a gigantic crescent-shaped hall made of living metal, located at the heart of the tomb. It can accommodate hundreds of thousands of Necron warriors, and at its core stand the enormous Dolmen Gates, through which the Subakar dynasty dispatches its armies to all new territories. The Dolmen Gates in the Hollow Sun are indispensable. Without them, there's no escaping the star. You do remember that the Dolmen Gates are a Catan development, conceived by the Necrons to traverse the galaxy through the webway. Through the Dolmen Gates of Subakar, only a modest number of Necrons have thus far passed, Yet these entities do not idle and continue to augment their ranks. Speaking of the Charnavok, whom Amontech greatly feared and despised, during the Great Sleep, the tombs suffered significantly and were ravaged by the fleets of the Tyrannids, the Behemoth in particular. Presently, the Charnavok still exist, but they are merely shards of their former dynasty. In essence, these entities have found themselves embroiled in a conflict between the Tyrannids and the Imperium. Nonetheless, their tomb worlds remain, albeit few, scattered across various locales, yet they persist. The dynasty itself is closely linked with Zarek. The main world of the Charnavok currently is Bardic, situated within the Ultima Segmentum. Second on our list would be the Sautek dynasty, whose domains are located on the eastern fringes of space, encompassing a territory of 80 tomb worlds with the crown world of Mandragora. The Necrons of this dynasty are distinguished by being one of the mightiest Necron dynasties, hence their tomb worlds practically unscathed through the Great Sleep. The stasis crypts of the dynasty were filled to the brim with the most elite Necron warriors who had survived the war in heaven and planned to take the galaxy under their control after the Great Sleep. The singular and most severe downside for the Sauteks was the demise of their Pharaon on the crowned tomb world of Mandragora during the Great Sleep. Henceforth, the tomb was engulfed in decades of power struggles, in which none could emerge victorious. This stalemate persisted far too long, until Imhotep the Stormlord awoke. Quite astounded by the ongoing events, he immediately recognized the necessity to take matters into his own hands and to restore the once grand dynasty. Imhotep rallied an army and declared his claim to the throne of the crown world of Mandragora. Opposition against him was futile. He annihilated any who did not join him. Indeed, in essence, he had no rivals, although strictly speaking there was and still is one. He resides on the tomb world of Gidrim, and he is known as Zandrek. He managed to transform his tomb world into a mini crown world for the Sautek, annexing a dozen star systems to his new empire. He was regarded as a true military genius, albeit with minor deviations. His mind, too, was damaged during the Great Sleep, now believing himself to still be a creature of flesh and blood, colloquially speaking, a necrontyr, and still partaking in quelling revolts against the Triarch Zarek. In his enemies, he does not see humans, orcs, or the Imperium. He sees the noble houses of the necrontyr, thus endeavours to capture all military leaders and treat them as equals. This naturally is greatly disfavoured by his court, but they scarcely counter him, for he is formidable himself, and he has a formidable aide. Named Oberon, alongside a substantial contingent of Lich Guards, guards the peace of Zandrek and aids him in battle. Moreover, the tomb world of Gidrim is simply riddled with various traps in places where entry by ordinary Necrons is prohibited. In essence, the current overlord, Imhotep, does not consider Zandrek a threat. Furthermore, he deems him maximally loyal, for Zandrek has no interest in seizing power. There's a rumour that he fully comprehends everything and simply chooses to cosplay his younger self from the times he was a necrontyr, as it makes his life much more amusing. But what's crucial is that Imhotep the Stormlord has no objections. The lord of the Sautek dynasty, undeniably of the crown world Mandragora, is famed for his sheer hatred of the orcs, as their logic baffles him. Hence, he has set his goal to annihilate all orcs across the galaxy. Quite ambitious, wouldn't you agree? Here it's worth momentarily diverting to mention that I will not be listing all the tomb worlds of the dynasty. Simply enumerating them would scarcely entertain you. In this video, I've only taken into account the tomb worlds that hold significance for the Necrons and are associated with intriguing tales. Imhotep, by the way, consistently crafts these stories himself, expanding his domains with various tomb worlds and even small dynasties. Not so long ago, the Arin Marok dynasty swore allegiance to Imhotep to protect their tomb world Somenor from an invasion by the Elder from the craft world Alatok. The assault was led by an Elder Farseer named Starbane. The Elder aimed to catch the sleeping Necron tomb world off guard and quickly deal with it. However, they faced the united forces of the Sauteks and Arin Maroks instead, who repelled them fiercely. The only one to return home to Alatok was Starbane, albeit Imhotep had severed his right hand, given his penchant for chopping off limbs. The Space Marines occasionally receive similar treatment. Next in line is another ancient dynasty known as the Necthist. During the succession wars organized by the Necrontyr against the Silent King and the Triarch, these fellows earned a reputation for treachery. The local Pharaoh, Oblis the Enslaver, chose not to follow the Silent King's orders, which greatly angered him. Consequently, much later, when the Orcs attacked the crown world of the Necthist, named Mobius, the Triarchy ignored their distress signals, and the tomb world was devastated. Within a month, a large part of the Necthist perished. In truth, the dynasty reclaimed their territories, but most of their empire lay in ruins. To this day, the Necthists are considered exceedingly peculiar and employ any tactics to defend their territory. Ever since they were betrayed, there's been no talk of honor or justice towards their kin. Since then, other dynasties regard them as savages and prefer to avoid interactions with them. The tomb world of the Necthist, Moebius, consists of a vast number of crypts that appear as an ever-changing labyrinth created from corridors in hyperspace, designed so that no one but the Necthist themselves could escape. Numerous Deathwatch kill teams, Mechanicus explorators and diverse Xenos have perished in these corridors. And what about the Saracen dynasty, you might ask? Aren't they the coolest among the Necrons? They must have the coolest crown world. Here the situation is maximally strange. The matter at hand is that Zarek did not go to sleep for 60 million years. Instead, he embarked upon a vast warship named the Song of Oblivion, which was the size of a large city of the Imperium, and flew into space to explore the nature of power. Essentially, this is their crown world, with its own tomb worlds where many Necrons of the Saracen dynasty lay in slumber. However, they awoke much earlier, of course, because Zarek was constantly searching for a way of reverse biotransference and stumbled upon a Tyrannid Hive fleet. Startled by the level of threat, he immediately awakened them all. In general, there are enough Saracen tomb worlds in the galaxy, but many of them suffered greatly during the Great Sleep because the Eldar made them their primary target. After Zarek's return and the moment when the Necrons realized they no longer adhered to the command protocols, many dynasties rebelled against Saracen, blaming him for their fate. Overall, the Saracen dynasty is renowned for its adept use of the Blackstone. They can create various devices and weapons from it. Many warriors of the Saracen possess Blackstone technology for protection against Psychers and the Warp. Moreover, it is believed that the Saracen dynasty possesses the finest bodies amongst all Necrons. I propose we speak of the Maenarchs, known for their particular cynicism and cruelty in slaughtering enemies on the battlefield, making them highly esteemed by the Silent King. He knew that he would one day use them against the Catan, the servants of the Old Ones, and even those who simply decided to rebel against the Triarch. Interestingly, despite Zarek's trust, other dynasties openly displayed their discontent with the Maenarch dynasty, calling them utterly uncivilized. They even wanted to annihilate them, which of course is very difficult because the Maenarchs strictly punished everyone. When it came time to fight the Satan, the Maenarchs took on the task thoroughly, quite literally destroying Landugor the Flayer. They did not even shatter him into shards. He was erased from the universe, cursing the Maenarchs lastly with the Flayer virus, which turns scraps into frenzied flesh and blood hunters who fashion cloaks from the skins of their victims. It is said even the high ranks of the Maenarch dynasty are susceptible to the Flayer virus, and soon there might be none left who are sane. The Flayer virus, incidentally, is also infectious and passes from one Necron to another. Naturally, healthy Necrons go to great lengths to avoid the infected. They embark on pilgrimages to their tomb world of Drazak, known as the Bone Kingdom. Of course, this is no coincidence. Drazak is located on the northeastern edge of the galaxy, in a place known as the Ghoul Stars. There are so many vile creatures there it's frightful to imagine, but specifically, Drazak is a real citadel of rotten flesh, meat and bone shards where the flayed ones constantly bring their grisly haul to satiate their metallic bodies. The tomb world is ruled by a certain Valgul, known as the Fallen Lord. Seated upon a throne of fractured bones and flayed skin, he rules his realm, gazing out with his sole functioning eye. The most intriguing aspect is that Valgul is not infected with the Flayer virus, yet he manages to run all related operations. Most likely he simply enjoys fueling the bloodlust of his followers. Thus, mountains of the Flayed One literally rot everywhere within his domain. At this moment, he takes great pleasure in dispatching fleets of Flayed One from Drazak to nearby worlds, where he harvests a formidable bounty for his kingdom. He desires neither weapons, wealth, nor slaves, only flesh and blood. As mentioned, the intention was to eliminate the Maynarch dynasty by their own brethren. To be specific, it was the Sautek and Artun dynasties that refused to tolerate such impurities within their ranks. However, Zarek was not foolish and exerted considerable effort to ensure the Maynarch dynasty survived the Great Sleep. He aided in uncovering their worlds on the fringes of the galaxy and spared no expense in waking the dynasty anew, strong and responsive to his call. Notably, the Flayer curse began to manifest among the Maynarch even before the Great Sleep, and the dynasty's ruling class quickly realized that the Great Sleep would not aid them. It would only delay their inevitable destruction within the silence of stasis crypts. Therefore, the leading Maynarch ordered the development of the most nightmarish weapons possible, such as Tombstalker and Acanthrite, after which they entered their slumber. Zarek was not mistaken. The sleep of the Maynarch dynasty was relatively calm and secure. This was largely because the crown worlds of the Maynarch were located in secluded places that failed to attract Xenos interest. Nevertheless, Zarek allocated a contingent of the Triarch Praetorians to protect the sleep of the Maynarch dynasty, who, when necessary, would awaken the Necrons and deploy them into battle. The secret tomb worlds of the Maynarch were awakened at the moment Zarek had designated. They emerged from their sleep after the ancient Caracal binary star went supernova. The sun's fiery death obliterated the Caracal system, void of Necrons but abundant in reminders of the Catan, like Dolmen Gates. Zarek understood that destroying the Dolmen Gates would trigger a surge of unusually powerful energy, which would instantly be directed into the warp. This occurred in the year 990 of the 41st millennium. The energy from it was directed into the warp, extinguishing all warp storms and turbulences in the Orpheus sector, simultaneously killing thousands of astropaths aboard spacecraft, which were navigating local routes at that time. The ships, by the way, were also destroyed. It was an epic time for the awakening of the Maynarch dynasty, and they did not waste time. Swiftly restoring order within their tomb worlds, they realized that Zarek's protocols were no longer in effect. The heads of the dynasty quickly took control into their own hands and seized all nearby worlds of other Necron dynasties, employing their typical methods of either enslavement, genocide, or systematic destruction. They have prepared such a fate not only for their closest kin, but also for all the worlds in the Orpheus sector, where, as of this moment, a very great number of planets of the Imperium are located. The most distanced by the dynasty after the Maynarch, of course, are the Novok. They are feared by the Maynarch themselves in places, for they annihilate millions of living and non-living organisms without any mercy, slicing through them as a knife through butter. They do not stop even when their bodies are completely covered in the flesh and blood of their enemies, which overall is reflected in their color scheme. The Novok dynasty have been weird even before biotransference. Back then they killed their enemies and smeared their faces and hands with their blood. Since then they specialize in close combat and the utilization of hordes of Lichguard and members of the Destroyer cult in the fray. The crown world of the Novok dynasty is the tomb world of DHL-6. Their second base serves as the tomb world of Draven. The symbol of the dynasty contains a reference to the 6 conquest wars waged by the founders of the great dynasties. Currently, the Novok industrially slaughter orcs, and once even stumbled upon Mortarion and the Death Guard, who infected them with a disease affecting living metal. This epidemic struck many of the Novok tomb worlds, but could not destroy the dynasty. Indeed, who could destroy them? However, we have a documented fact that Nurgle infects the Necrons. Now, the Novok dynasty are occupied with killing Tyranids. Next up, we have the Nihalach dynasty, the very one where Pharaon Crispek commands, a traditionalist and conservative to the bone, who overall have great relations with the Sarek and the Triarch, as well as with the stances of the Necrontyr, which the race practiced even before the war in heaven. Above all, The Nihilak love to hoard various treasures that they have taken from civilizations erased from history, rather than industrially like the Trazyn. It is said they have so much different wealth in their vaults that there is more than all other dynasties combined. Hence, the Necrons of the Nihilak dynasty are so proud and lofty, and will do everything to protect their treasures. For a long time, the dynasty adhered to a policy of isolationism, not particularly getting involved in any severe battles, focusing only on protecting their treasures. But if someone did attack them, they were brutal with them. The Nihilak do not rest until they have completely eradicated all traces of the aggressor down to the root. The crown world of the Nihilak tomb world, of course, also exists. It is called Giden, and there is a big problem with it. Due to a certain malfunction in the spatial matrix of the reality stabilizer, Geden is always halfway in a pocket dimension, appearing in the real world for only a few hours. At first, the Necrons thought this was sheer nonsense, but then realized that being in reality for just 2 hours greatly simplifies the defense of the tomb world. Who would attack it at all if anyone at all could find out about it? Deep beneath Geden's surface lies the Oracle Chamber, wherein the bulbous head of an ancient alien prophet is kept alive in stasis. The prophet's thoughts are projected onto holographic images, which are said to be able to predict the future. However, the head is vehemently against such usage and attempts to deliberately obscure all visions to prevent giving the metallic beings any advantage. Do you know what other tomb world has been taken over by the Nihilak dynasty? Solemnace, home of the infamous Trazyn the Infinite. Here lies his tomb called Solemnace. It's essential to understand that this is not merely a tomb world, but a true museum housing a vast array of wonders from across the galaxy. Even before the Great Sleep, noble Necrons would visit to entertain themselves, viewing the different exhibits, touching them. Solemnace's collection might even rival the Black Library of the Eldar. This is not certain, but it indeed is vast. The highlight of Solemnace are its prismatic galleries, containing a collection of sculptures depicting iconic events for the galaxy. Few know that all the figurines today are alive. Why bother with sculptures when it's easier to steal space marines or even custodes and have them stand as sculptures? Solemnace is located on the eastern fringe and appears as an unassuming grey tomb world, hidden in the depths of space. It is said to have appeared before humanity ventured into space. The only thing illuminating Solemnace is a pale sun of artificial origin. Essentially, it's a cluster of mirrors with precisely adjusted angles to capture energy from a powerful source within the planet's core. The planetoid Solemnace is essentially a gigantic Dyson sphere, its outer shell composed of myriad machines creating an artificial atmosphere. Where does Trazyn get so much energy? At least partly from a shard of Catan he took from the depths of the planet Midgardia in the Fenris system. This shard is a non-nucleonic flaming piece, gifted to the Necrons by the Dolmen Gates. Another shard fuels Zarek's mobile throne. A virtue of Solemnace is that, akin to the Emperor's ship, the somnium of the Emperor of Mankind, its tomb can be controlled by a small team of assistants. Nonetheless, within Trazyn's light, there are both Lichguard and even the Arch-Cryptek Sanet, who serves as Chief Cryptek and the curator of the Solemnace collection. Interestingly, the innumerable have linked Solemnace with a concealed pocket of subspace reality, containing a citadel known as the Sanctum. Here lie arenas where various warriors of the Imperium battle for victory, amusing Trazyn. Victory, in his words, shall be freedom. Of course, ferocious skirmishes constantly occur there, and many even find themselves on the brink of death afterward. Nonetheless, Trazyn can heal nearly any wound thanks to the latest Necron technologies. If you think he truly would release someone, that of course is not the case. The main victor becomes another prized collection of Trazyn on Solemnace. Nephrith the Untouched is the only and last pharaoh of the Amunos dynasty, which organized resistance against the Triarchy and the Catan, offering the Necrontyr hope for salvation. Rumors say the pharaoh wasn't afflicted like all Necrontyr and was ready to aid his people in curing all diseases. According to legend, Nefered led the forces of the Amunos dynasty and attacked the star gods. In the process, he was killed by Nyadra the Burning One, but in reality it was quite the opposite. Nephrith was killed by his own nobility, following which the entire dynasty accepted Zarek's gift of immortality. The higher ranks of the Amunos dynasty decided to preserve the pharaoh's body, as he indeed was not susceptible to any diseases. The idea was to keep him in case of a reverse biotransference. You never know. Nephrith's tomb became a complex on the planet Cephris, also known as Serenade. It is said that in Nephrith's burial chamber lies a star map leading to an artifact known as the Astrarium Mysterios. Finding and entering the tomb was very difficult, as it opened once every few millennia, sometimes centuries, all according to specific astrological events. The planet was aptly named Serenade for a reason. The fact is, the tomb constantly transmitted the same sequence of numbers 3211, 1545, 4131, 5322, and this negatively affected all life forms on the planet. It was because of Serenade that the collaboration between Trazyn and Oricon the Diviner began, each of whom wanted to uncover the secrets held within the tomb. All this is amusing also because Neferet was captured by a shard of the deceiving Satan, which pretended that Neferet was immune to the diseases of the Necrontyr. This shard was eventually imprisoned deep within Serenade. Since the deceiver could still control Necrons, it fortified the legend about Neferet and manipulated Trazyn and Oricon to free it. The twist of this deceiving shard was that it was as powerful as 5. 6 shards, a rarity indeed. It all ended with the clash of 2 Necrons against the deceiver, during which Oricon, thanks to Trazyn, transformed into a being of pure energy and defeated the Satan. What remained was taken by Trazyn into his collection, and now he constantly pesters him with questions. The Amunos dynasty, incidentally, was destroyed during the Great Sleep. A solar flare of unimaginable force devastated the crown world of the Amunos, known as Hashtor, and destroyed all the slumbering Necrons. Indeed, some dynasties truly have no luck after awakening. Just ask the members of the Divanak dynasty. The Divanak dynasty is a Necron dynasty which has only recently fully awoken. Originally awakening from the Great Sleep in early M41 from their crown world of Trakon, the Necrons of the Divanak dynasty were unable to shake off their hibernation-induced disorientation for nearly 5 centuries, and this made them vulnerable to an assault by a nearby forge world of the Imperium. Eventually, the Divanak were able to repel the human siege and drive the Imperial forces from their world. Since then, they have been attempting to search for other lost tomb worlds of their dynasty. Thus far, they have been unable to make contact with any, as the missing Divanak worlds were engulfed and destroyed by a warp storm thousands of years ago. Next, we have the crown world of Megoshta from the Thokt dynasty, who survived the Great Sleep while preserving a significant portion of their mind's data blocks. This is truly astonishing, but the regular warriors from Thokt are not mere puppets. They can think and speak. As for other Necrons, it's best left unsaid. The dynasty's lords are very intelligent and serve as excellent support for Zarek, who has only recently returned. The crown world of the Thokt, Megoshta, is simply splendid. It is made up of gold-covered ziggurats and obelisks inlaid with precious stones. Within them lie terrible machines capable of subjugating an entire sector at the command of the Silent King. Moreover, the Thokts possess one of the largest fleets among the Necrons. The central worlds of the dynasty are located in the Hierarchy Deeps, a region in the segmentum Pacificus filled with void rifts that emit significant radiation. The local cryptex decided to utilize this to their advantage, now adding it to the weaponry of the dynasty's warriors. They themselves emit a ghastly glow, bestowing upon their enemies radiant emanations. Necrons are immune, but living beings are not. The Nephrech dynasty is an extremely wealthy one, its worlds rich in the precious metals used to construct its legions. The location of the dynasty's territory close to the galactic core in Ultima Segmentum also grants it access to rich energy reserves, enhancing the strength of its armies. At the center of the dynasty's glyph are 3 rings, symbolizing the triple star of their crown world, Aryand. Once, Aryand was a typical hive world of the Imperium, but in the year 829 of the 41st millennium, it was seized by the Necrons of the Altimhor dynasty, led by Overlord Vitok. These beings slaughtered countless humans and desecrated the sacred artifacts of the world of Ariand, which belonged to the Nephrek. Awoken from their slumber, a mad pharaoh of the Nephrek named Silphek was utterly stunned, gathered an army, and with frenzied fury struck down the Altimor dynasty. Why Silphek was mad, 60 million years also had not passed him by without effect. Upon awakening, he demanded the cryptex create for him a skin made of metagold, capable of transforming into pure light through complex alchemical processes. He desired to shine as the stars, and he gifted the same feature to his servants. Since then, Silphek has considered himself a god who has gained material form. Interestingly, such an oddity as a Necron made of pure light caught the attention of Magnus the Red and his 1,000 sons. So, you might ask if this metagold was for vanity. No, all Nephrek dynasty Necrons can activate the metagold for their purposes and move across the earth at great speed, teleport, and phase through solid matter. The properties of metagold are not fully understood, and even the Nephrek's cryptex do not know how to make such a state permanent. Nonetheless, the metagold works. Of course, the Nephreks attempted to thwart the Imperium, specifically the chapter of the Dark Angels, led by Chief Librarian named Danethium. But all descendants of the Lion took severe hits, and having lost almost their entire army, they retreated to their base. Now, regarding the Empire of the Severed, whose crown world is Sarkon. The thing is, the Necrons too are fond of artificial intelligence. In every tomb world, there is what's known as a program that watches over the Necrons' foundation, protects them, and awakens them when necessary. The Tomb Worlds program is based on artificial intelligence, which sometimes also instigates a rebellion. On the Tomb of Sarkon, everything transpired in the following manner. Radiation storms, which raged on the planet's surface for many millions of years, gradually destroyed the memory engrams of every Necron, turning literally everyone from warriors to pharaons into automatons. The Tombs program realized it could control these automatons and decided this was for the better. Everything was orderly, no one fought for power, and it began to spread this order to other worlds. From then on, it called itself the Sarkoni Emperor, and calmly sends an army of soulless automatons to neighboring tomb worlds to do the same as on Sarkon. The first to suffer was the tomb world of Takarak, whose defences quickly fell and augmented the Emperor of Sarkon's army. Following were other Necron tomb worlds. They say Sarkon now possesses a vast army, which sees through the will of the program, calling these beings the Haunted Legions. Members of other dynasties fear and despise them, and logically so, the Sarkoni Emperor has many methods of enslaving Necrons, ranging from mind-shackled scarabs to straightforward domination with invasion. The Necrons possess the tomb world of Zantragora, the entirety of whose nobility is fixated on the concepts of reverse biotransference and the search for new bodies for the Necrons. They find their living metal bodies displeasing. To remedy this, they traverse the galaxy seeking various xeno-species, from whom they gather hundreds of thousands of dead and living bodies for experiments. Subsequently, on Zantragora, they conduct dissections, experiments with genome grafting, mutate tissues, and perform molecular deconstruction. In short, they seek the perfect specimen for themselves. The concept of anesthesia or mercy is utterly alien there, as the Necrons view all Xenos as inferior beings. Their screams and pain have no significance whatsoever to these metal beings. The chief experimenter on Zantragora is, of course, Illuminor Seras, who has made it his goal to unravel the very mystery of life, for which he tirelessly dissects and studies thousands of beings from other races. Naturally, he shall never unveil the secrets of life, but that does not deter him from attempting, especially since his experiments yield a plethora of devices useful to the Necrons. Following the return of the Silent King Sarek, he decided to join his cause in reversing biotransference. Xeras was deeply intrigued by this project, especially since Sarek promised him answers to questions about life should they succeed with the reverse biotransference. Overall, Xeras is indifferent about collaboration. For instance, he aided the Nihilak dynasty in creating the Pariah Nexus in the Nephilim sector, among other endeavors. The Sarnek dynasty ruled by the pharaoh Thazar the Invincible in their crown world, the tomb world of Zapanek, deserves a mention as well. He refers to himself as the Pirate King, which is indeed the sheer truth. Many ages ago, during the final stages of the war in heaven, it was above Zapanek where one of the most intense battles in space took place. The Sarnek fleet battled against thousands of Eldar ships and emerged victorious. The surviving Eldar retreated, leaving the planet untouched. Nonetheless, Zapanek was also somewhat astounded by this turn of events, for since then its orbit has been cluttered with the blackened wrecks of thousands of ships, and the local nobles do not even attempt to cleanse their near-orbit space. Interestingly, Thazar was not originally a pharaoh. He was expelled from the dynasty, but after millions of years he arrived on Zapanek at the very end of the 41st millennium and reprogrammed the local Necrons to acknowledge him as their true pharaoh. Since then they have served him, creating a rather amusing situation. Thazar declared himself the Pirate King and renamed Zapanek into the Reeve World, after which he assembled numerous ships from millions of tons of debris and now partakes in piracy in the sector and in the Webway. Indeed, expelling him turned out to be a grave mistake. The Sarnek dynasty also possesses another notable world, Athenos, known within the Imperium for the Imperial Guard regiment named the Athonian Tunnel Rat. Furthermore, it is renowned for housing a Sarnek dynasty tomb ship, which once awakened, launched into space and obliterated the capital of Athonian. Possibly, the destruction of the planet would have continued further, but Thazar decided that the humans living on the planet were irrational beings and simply flew away, destroying an Eldar listening station on its way, which was located in orbit of the world. Another fashionable world of the Necrons is Trantis, a tomb world known as the Raider's Moon. It is located in the Segmentum Tempestus and indulges in raids on the nearby Imperial worlds no less than Thazar. The main one there, by the way, is Mandal, whose moon is Trantis. Mandal is rich in resources of the planets of the Imperium, and the guides from Trantis shake local farmer and miner communities, attacking in the dark of the night on their night scythes. Sometimes in just one night, several settlements can be destroyed, leaving nothing but scorched craters in their place. And all because the settlements of Mandal are far from each other. And by the time someone notices anything, a lot of time will have passed. When the locals realized that they were being attacked at night, the settlement started to fear the onset of twilight and organized a curfew, but this does not prevent the Necrons from cutting everyone down to the last. Interestingly, Trantis was never a central tomb world. It was a transit point for transferring and storing resources. But after awakening from the Great Sleep, the tomb world became autonomous, so its vaults bulge with plundered loot. Yet the Necrons of Trantis continue their raids because the plan must be exceeded. Every dynasty has its own twist. Some have a head predicting the future, some have plans for reverse biotransportation, but the dynasties of Oroskar are somewhat different. They possess a truly ultimate weapon known as the Celestial Orrery. This machine consists of a web of holograms and necrodermis with the various tiny, floating, glowing lights representing a star in the galaxy. Each of these are recorded in an intricate matrix record that contains the locations of every star in the cosmos. The Celestial Orrery is hidden in the very core of the planet Thanatos. And if the Necrons decide to extinguish some tiny point that represents a star in the Celestial Orrery, it will become a supernova in the galaxy after some time, destroying an entire system. The catch is, if they explode stars like that, it would destroy the fundamental laws of the universe, probably obliterating the entire galaxy in the process. Therefore, if the Necrons of the Celestial Orrery use it, it's only for observation and, of course, very, very carefully. In short, the guys from Thanatos are unique observers who make sure to destroy only those stars and systems that need it, like a gardener pruning his favorite plants. Understandably, wars for Thanatos are incessant, and should the Oroskar dynasty feel overwhelmed, they would likely opt to annihilate Orrery outright. Not too long ago, forces bearing the word endeavoured to seize Thanatos, but thanks to the cohesive efforts and exemplary governance of the Pharaoh Oroskar dynasty, specifically in the person of Hakmefet, they were repelled. Thanatos was able to withstand the siege for an extended period until the arrival of Trazyn, who deceived everyone. By blackmailing the conclave of celestial guardians, he requested the opportunity to utilize the celestial orrery to ascertain why a bell within his collection had tolled. It was discovered that this phenomenon was linked to Cadia, which was on the brink of collapse. The subsequent events are, as you know, well documented. The conclave of celestial guardians, incidentally, consists of a group of 25 Necron cryptechs from the Oroscar dynasty, assigned to protect and safeguard the celestial orrery. Mention must also be made of the stasis docks on the tomb world of Sidon. It is from here that for thousands of years prior to the war in the heavens, ships laden with Necronter colonists were routinely dispatched, aiming to seize and colonize ever-new stars propelled by slowly igniting fuel. Every 33 weeks, a colossal stasis vessel would depart from Sidon's shipyards, directing the immortal legions toward distant planets. As you are likely aware, Belisarius Cawl now possesses the secret of the Blackstone pylons, and he is incredibly eager to amass more Blackstone for himself, deposits of which are often found on Necron tomb worlds. Take, for instance, Amenhotep II, a dry imperial forge world distantly reminiscent of Mars. Cawl discovered it post the unveiling of the Great Rift. What piqued his interest? Having sent an Adeptus Mechanicus expedition to the world, the guys led by Magos Dominus Dentrex Oligostion were trying to figure out how much rock there was and where it came from. It was revealed that the Black Stone was part of ancient Necron ruins, and of course beneath it laid a tomb, marking a dire tale for the defenders of Amenhotep II. While Algaston busied himself with samples of Blackstone for Cawl, the Mechanicus ships prepared to obliterate all Necron structures from orbit, which in the end they achieved. It seemed as though the Adeptus Mechanicus had triumphed superficially, but then Amenhotep IV became vulnerable to warp invasions. As soon as the Blackstone structures were destroyed, a brightly coloured warp rift appeared in the sky, gradually expanding in size. It happens that tomb worlds are captured by demons, as with the Oltep dynasty and their crown world of Kochalos. They awoke at the beginning of the 40th millennium to find their planet under the rule of the demon prince Boibulgor. In truth, Kochalos was initially colonized by the Imperium, but Boibulgor invaded the planet, slaughtered all its inhabitants, and transformed the world into a lifeless orb. Subsequently, the Necrons of the Oltep dynasty awoke, and a fierce battle amongst them commenced. Most interestingly, the Necrons understood what was transpiring there only upon reaching an immense hollow sphere within the planet, where lay the lair of Boibulgor. The demons from the Oltep dynasty annihilated the Necrons, after which their remnants were submerged in metallic skulls within the planet's cold core, as Khorne is indifferent to the skulls offered to him. Boibulgor still rules over Kochalos, if it can at all be called rule. Another dynasty that rose against the biotransference and the decisions of the Triarch was the Kansu dynasty. Upon learning that Zarek decided upon such a desperate measure, the dynasty openly rebelled against the Triarchy. The only one who did not oppose Sarek was the prince Raxan, who, deceived, received the title of Pharaon of the dynasty for turning against his kin. He commanded the Necron forces that overcame the Kansu and dragged them into the biotransference chambers. The tragedy lies in the fact that after the biotransference, all Kansu were used as expendable material and cannon fodder, leading Raxan to join Sarek in the destruction of the Khatan. Distressed by such treatment towards his brethren, almost all rulers of Kansu were destroyed in the war in heaven, and their warriors and immortals were reprogrammed and taken into other dynasties. The only survivor was Pharaon Raxan, who resolved to avenge all Khatan at all costs and imprison every shard to ensure they never rose again, aiming to destroy them if possible. The Neokares dynasty is presumably known to you thanks to the tomb world of Borsis, which the Imperium named the World Engine. In fact, Borsis was a massive mobile mechanism of the Necrons from the Neokares dynasty. Borsis was first discovered in the Vidar sector in the year 926 of the 41st millennium. The World Engine, a Necron weapon, was a planet-sized spaceship, armed with Gauss projectors capable of scouring planets of all life. The World Engine was attacked by a task force composed of elements from 15 Space Marine chapters, plus elements from the Imperial Navy. Even the starship's mightiest weapons could not harm it. Drop pods and torpedoes could not penetrate its void shields, and it was impossible to lock onto it with teleport beams. The Imperial task force tried 12 times to overwhelm it through sheer valor and firepower, and was rewarded with a string of destroyed and crippled ships and millions of casualties. The World Engine destroyed a third of an Imperial Navy battle fleet before Artur Amrad, the chapter master of the Astral Knights, decided to ram the World Engine with his battle barge, Tempestus. In the Orpheus sector there is a dynasty that calls itself Vralekth. The Imperium encountered it on the planet Hydragast, which is essentially crucial for human survival in the Orpheus sector. No, humans do not live there. There are numerous agro-complexes that constantly harvest resources from the boundless oceans of Hydragast and feed many distant worlds with them. On Hydragast, there are essentially only fortified outposts, which do not even communicate with each other due to strong storms. It is precisely on Hydragast, in the depths of the ocean, that the stasis tombs and the Vralekth dynasty were hidden. An excellent place to hide. Not the center of a star, of course, but underwater one can become invisible. In short, at some point, the Necrons woke up and struck a cruel blow to the Imperium right during a powerful storm. The hallmark of the Vralekth is the high degree of corrosion of the living metal under the influence of the environment, which does not affect their combat effectiveness in any way. They merely become tinted with rusty colors, but in reality they do not suffer from this at all. Add to this the fact that they are also a friendly of the Maynarch dynasty, and everything immediately falls into place. At the far end of the galactic south, beyond the borders of the Segmentum Tempestus, rules the Arotepk dynasty. They have quite a few tomb worlds there, and they do not intend to stop expanding their dominions. Most of all, these guys dislike the Eldar for obvious reasons. In 898 M41, legions of the Arotepk marched upon the Eldari maiden world of Selentia. The Necrons fought their way through an alliance of Craftworld Eldari and Harlequins to plunder an ancient gem from the heart of Selentia's world spirit, before vanishing into the void. In 912 M41, a shard of the Void Dragon escaped from its imprisonment, laying waste to the Arotepk dynasty in its mindless rage. Though only a faint shadow of a true Catan, the Void Dragon gorged itself on a dozen worlds, expending its fury upon the living before the Arotepk cryptex could finally force it back into its cage. A special place for Necrons is, of course, Jericho Reach. There are enough tombs there in which something happens. Take the same Reelers. It's an Imperial mining world located in the Arcalis cluster in the Jericho Reach. These guys welcomed the Aculus Crusade with open arms. "Return us to the Imperium forthwith," they petitioned, having renewed their oaths to the God Emperor. They were prepared to support the crusade with both manpower and resources, yet their efforts came to naught. The Imperial command perceived them as a threat. More precisely, the intervention came from Lord Commander Sebiaskor Ebengrave. The crux of the matter lay with the planet's vast number of Tau devotees, who ardently wished for humanity to embrace the greater good. The Tau, for their part, did not waste time either. Initially, Ebengrave imposed sanctions against the planet, but the situation culminated in a complete quarantine. The Lord sealed off the spaceports, halting all trade within the system. For many years, Reelers remained under siege, descending into chaos. Once mighty mining cities turned to ruins, and some merely rusted and rotted away, a fact that concerned the Lord not in the slightest. He deemed all inhabitants of Reelers xenophobes, paying them no heed as he sought to strengthen the Tau's influence in the nearby region. However, upon hearing that Reelers had risen in rebellion, he immediately turned his attention towards it. In the ensuing confrontation, which, to be fair, was quite fierce, several cities of Reelus were submerged. Among them was the principal city of Hellsmark. When the local survivors decided to descend into one of the submerged cities, they discovered something far more ominous than the Tau. It turned out that the city had fallen into underwater caves and tunnels filled with dormant machines of unknown origin. Most of the expeditions sent to explore the depths failed to return. Naturally, this attracted the attention of Inquisitor Hoth. He gathered his retinue and set out for Reelus to investigate the happenings. The last communication from Hata was sent from these very caverns, suggesting that whatever he uncovered there had profoundly shaken him. Since then, the Death Watch of the Ordo Xenos has been dispatching squads to the site to investigate, thus far without success. Following in line is another world in the Jericho Reach, known as Sovereign, which is currently under the control of the Dark Mechanicum heretics, but in reality serves as a waking Necron tomb world of the Subekar dynasty. Once an agrarian world, Sovereign experienced an unanticipated arrival of numerous chroniclers. Thanks to the agriculture cultivated by the Savarins, they managed to comfortably survive the Age of Strife. They faced neither confusion nor heresy, as there was ample food, the most crucial element. Chaos cults failed to take root here as well, for the locals possessed a strong belief in the God Emperor, regularly organizing various events and dedicating hymns to him. Deviations occurred but were rare. Sovereign was governed by a local schemer, holding the position of a temporary governor. Since the Imperium's absence, power simply transferred through inheritance under the title of temporary governor. Thus, under the influence of time, Sovereign society evolved into a feudal one, where farmers continuously toiled and were unable to attain promotions, whilst a ruling dynasty occupied the high post. In the 41st millennium, the Dark Mechanicum from the Forge decided to utilize the resources of Sovereign for the benefit of the ruinous powers, and the Aculus Crusade was delayed by the Hadex anomaly and did not arrive in time to offer assistance. Consequently, Magos Phaserus poisoned the planet's water reserves with a specially crafted virus, intended to be activated at the opportune moment. When the Death Watch arrived on the planet, they activated the virus, transforming the local farmers into true berserkers. Initially, they suspected that slavers were to blame, but later the Ordo Hereticus took it upon themselves to address the problem, striking the planet with cyclonic torpedoes. The exterminators completely annihilated all loyalists on the planet and decimated all production capabilities. The agricultural fields were the first to suffer. Do you think the Dark Mechanicum abandoned their attempts to seize Sovereign? They doubled their efforts, for in addition to the planetary produce, there were traces of Xenos presence. The Dark Mechanicum believed these to be remnants of an ancient civilization, potentially brimming with technology treasures. However, upon exploration, they stumbled upon a vast complex of caves with inscribed walls. As they descended deeper towards the planet's core, they encountered intricate security systems and technologies that eluded their comprehension. For years they attempted to disable the traps, and eventually discovered a complex containing thousands of Necron warriors. The Dark Mechanicum was astounded. Such ancient weaponry. They decided to study the Necron language and attempt to conquer the complex, intending to use it against the Loyalists. However, their attempt awakened the tomb world of Sovereign. Thousands of scarabs descended upon the Dark Mechanicum and their servants, swiftly tearing them apart. Thus was awakened the tomb world of the Subekar dynasty, which immediately signaled the Crown world. The Necrons are now slowly preparing to retaliate against the Dark Forge for the Dark Mechanicum's transgression into their realm. The planet itself had long ceased to be a blooming paradise, its atmosphere polluted with ash and toxins, with hardly any light reaching the world's surface. The atmosphere contains very little oxygen, making respirators a necessity for survival. The weather on Sovereign is dreadful, with constant fronts of hot and cold air occasionally sweeping across the planet, causing severe storms that continue to raise debris into the atmosphere. Without any biological processes, the restoration of the world's atmosphere and soil could take millions of tyrannic years. Though a daunting task, the Imperium has no need for it. The Necrons, indifferent to atmospheric conditions and weather, find the current situation rather favorable, as they do not breathe air. In the Jericho Reach lies a world named Scapula. The Adeptus Mechanicus on this planet produced a multitude of medicines, as well as conducting medical experiments. Myriad myths surround this planet, for instance, that its Magos biologists are the most talented of all, famed for their ability to reanimate dead tissue. Such research indeed took place, primarily aimed at extending the life of servitors. But there are also legends that experiments were conducted on humans. Many aristocrats from nearby worlds sought to arrange passage to Scapula, where they hoped to prolong their lives as much as possible. There were even those who arrived on the planet literally minutes before death. only to be brought back to life there. Of course, no one has any confirmation of this. Well, who would tell you about such things, especially in the Imperium, right? In short, the folks from Scapula dedicated their time to developing life-saving technologies. The experiments constantly required new patients. If they didn't come on their own, then the Mechanicus experimented on convicts and servitors. At some point, a struggle for power began on Scapula between the tech priests. Some left Scapula and went elsewhere to apply their talents, while those who remained began to fight for power. Underhanded intrigue, deceit, and even murder became commonplace on the planet. Plus, the locals started to delve into all sorts of forbidden activities. Aside from the Mechanicus, the planet was inhabited by many barbarians who at some point seized power in Scapula. All this scapular hustle and bustle continued until the year 724 of the 41st millennium, when the Death Watch's observatory station recorded a series of earthquakes, after which a 4-kilometer-wide chasm formed in the ground. An even larger object soared out of this chasm, but by that time it was too late for the Imperium and the Mechanicus. To be precise, it was a huge metallic structure covered in green glowing symbols and golden schematics. Thus, the ancient Necron tomb was awakened, after which the robots engaged in battle with the locals and the Tau, who had also taken an interest in the planet. Ever since then, they have been warring with each other there. But, understandably, not all the Necrons have awakened. It seems that Necrons pose a problem only for the Imperium or the Eldar and Tyranids, but of course that's not the case. Necrons are a problem for everyone, including the Orcs. For example, the tomb world of Fordris, considered in the Imperium as an uninhabited ghost world, turned out to be a haven for a vast number of Necrons, who began to awaken in the 41st millennium. Warboss Skullcrack of the Orcs learned that the planet was hiding some powerful weapon and decided to take possession of it, sending his War there, but he found nothing but sand and, of course, legions of Necron warriors emerging from the local bloody red saline seas. Water streamed from their bodies as they marched towards the Orcs, who initially stared dumbfounded, taking the fire of Gauss guns with their mushroom bodies, but then pulled themselves together and, swinging their choppers, charged to kill the iron aliens. But no matter how fiercely the Warboss and his fighters chopped the robots, severed arms dragged themselves through the sand back to their bodies, groping in the sand for heads and other limbs. The regeneration of the Necrons was fully displayed in all its glory. To delay the inevitable assembly of the robots, Skullcrack began to dismantle them into smaller parts, so they would take longer to assemble. Then the tide began to rise, and the Necron components were carried away by the water, hindering their regeneration. Bolstered by victory, Skullcrack instructed his boys to follow him, and he ran along the beach, finishing off the Necrons, retreating into the water. But then he spotted a colossal monolith, which emitted a beam that turned the Warboss into a smouldering pile of ash. This entire battle turned out to be merely a test by several Necron nobles who were checking their weaponry. Thus ended the saga of Skullcrack, for encroaching upon the Necron tomb worlds is hardly a wise idea. You must understand that there is still a vast number of Necron tomb worlds, and only a small fraction of them have awakened. Each of these worlds possesses its unique traits, and one could speak at length about them. Should all the Necrons awaken simultaneously, it would pose a grave problem for all the intelligent races of the galaxy. Luckily, this occurs gradually. However, as the analysts of the Imperium say, no world can rest easy, for the likelihood that Necrons lie dormant beneath you is immensely high.